to your best understanding, why was Keely LaCrosse cleared of any involvement in Brianna's disappearance by law enforcement?
I'm not sure that she was actually cleared. I just think they felt that they had gone as far as they could with her in the present circumstances.
And a real quick follow-up to that, have you had any communication with Kaylee since then?
No. I did interview Mike Stebbins one time, and Keely came into the, it was outside, and she came into the area and, was kind of introduced to me, but I didn't have any interaction with her. No. She offered up nothing.
Well, there have been some reports that she might have been out of town with family during the time of her disappearance, and that there were also some reports that she was behaving in a way that was unseasonably smug when asked about the disappearance by Shauna LaBelle. I was wondering if you knew anything about that.
I really don't know. I mean, I know she was questioned by police, and at one point she was involved in some kind of interstate drug trafficking charge or something. And she was facing some pretty serious charges. And, the police interviewed her, in light of those charges, hoping that something would, she'd be willing to talk about something. But to my knowledge, nothing ever came out of that interview of value to them.
What is your general opinion of Nathaniel Jackson and Ramon Ryans, and about how the theory concerning their involvement with Brianna's disappearance?
I guess the police have felt that they've gone as far as they could with them. I was never really comfortable with them because one is, I think they're bad guys, particularly Ramon Ryans. And, he was in that inner circle of when Moses Robar got killed. There's been some talk there that I was over a gun that Ramon Ryans had. And, they were definitely bad guys up there, not up to any good. And, I never personally had any interactions with them. I remember getting a phone call shortly after the disappearance, the caller at the other end of the line said, Brianna's been hidden under the floor in the basement of the house that they were at. And I remember calling the state police that night, and basically, I was very frustrated that. I was not in a very good state of mind, and basically, if they weren't going to do anything about it, then immediately drop everything they're doing and go up, then than I was, and but they did. So the sergeant at the time said, for me just to kind of chill out, and they would immediately go up and they would immediately give me a report of what they found. So.
And you did receive this report?
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he called me that night, and they had gone into the house, and they said that there was no basement in the house at all, and that she definitely was not there. And so, at that point, I was, but there's been a lot of speculation about those guys, and I think she had some encounters with Jackson. May have, met him in a party in the context of maybe a party or a local gathering or that sort of thing. But I'm not aware of any kind of connection that she really would have had to them.
What makes you say that? Was there a circle of friends that that Jackson had, that she had, that might have put them at a party together? Is that what makes you say that?
I think so.
Oh, okay.
Do you recall the names of any of Brianna's coworkers at the Black Lantern Inn?
I do not. No. Brianna only actually worked there I think, 2 weekends, maybe,
Right.
in a day here or there. I mean, she really just started that job.
Okay.
Did she work mostly nights?
Yes.
Okay.
Do you recall the names of the other people that Brianna was staying with after she moved out of home? Like, we know that she was staying with Jillian Stout more recently, but had also stayed at one point with James Robitil. Do you remember any of the other names?
No, off the top of my head, there was another boyfriend that she had in the local town, Brianna's age, and I remember her staying with him at his parents' house for. I would think it was a few-week period at least. I remember she broke her arm during the course, so I think they were riding go-karts or something at the time. And she got in a minor accident on that and broke her arm. Actually, the boyfriend there seemed like a nice young kid too, really.
And what did you think of James? How did you feel about him?
James I never really got the impression that he was a bad kid. He seemed pretty typical of the teenagers in the area. He did, in fact, live with his grandparents, and not his. I think his mother and father were separated. He did not live with either of them. And Brianna was there with James at his grandparents, for a certain amount of time. And I really don't remember the time frame there as far as how long either.
Now, there are multiple reports that Brianna encountered bullying. To your recollection, what was the nature of the bullying, and why do you think that she was targeted? Was it just something that was maybe, teenagers bullying, or, did it reach a higher extent that you know of?
I think she encountered some bullying at the initial high school she went to. Had trouble she was very popular. And I think the bullying, came from other girls, mostly, because, Brianna captured people's attention. And, she was a very, very beautiful young lady, and I think there was some jealousy going on there, no doubt. And I think what happened when she went to Enosburg High School, which we were literally kind of on the town line. And when she went there, transferred to there, sort of the same scenario kind of repeated itself in some ways. She was very much outspoken, speaking up for the underdog too. When something was going on that she didn't like, she would be the one to certainly speak up about it. And if that came to protecting other people, other kids that possibly were being bullied or something, Brianna was not afraid to get involved in it.
Where do you think that came from?
I just think she had a really strong sense of the good in everybody, and had a strong sense of justice. And when she seen that justice was kind of not being done, or she certainly, that affected her.
Do you recall the names of the law enforcement officials who were involved in Brianna's case initially?
Yeah, there was Tom Nelson was the first officer in charge of the case. He was the lieutenant at the St. Albans Police Barracks at the time. and he was in charge of it. And I don't, to this day, I have a very low opinion of it. I'm guessing here maybe the first 90 days. It could be longer. I have a problem. So I'm remembering dates and time frames on some of that.
Sure.
Yeah.
But he was. I mean, I think in a large. There was also a major there that was in charge of a number of barracks who I had some interactions with also, and some interactions with the local FBI agents at the time too, and I think largely due to the interactions with me and the press and how they handled things at first, and how embarrassing it was to them that they replaced Tom Nelson and moved him out of the barracks, and they brought in another lieutenant. I can't think of his name. He seemed like a good and decent man, but they were not near as aggressive in doing things, checking leads and doing things in a timely manner for me, for sure. And then he was there for some time, and then they replaced him with Glenn Hall, who was the lieutenant at that time and took over the barracks, and which started out as a pretty rocky relationships that I had with him also, and but he's the head of the criminal division of the Vermont State Police now, and he actually is still my go-to guy, and I've learned over the years, and to reasonably trust him.
Well, it's good to hear.
I mean, you learn not to trust anybody,
right,
on this kind of stuff.
Right.
You just don't. Everybody brings their own biases, and they bring their own, their own ideas about what's worthwhile investigating and what's not worthwhile investigating in a timely manner. I mean, I did end up with what I would call a friendship with the head of the Vermont State Police at the time, Tom Lesperance, and he really treated me good. He made about as close to an apology as you could get for how things had went on earlier, and at that time he offered to put what he said. He said, "I'm going to put two of my best men on this, and that's all they're going to do for a year is bring his case. And we're going to do it from the beginning, and we're going to do it right, and we're going to make sure that everything gets covered." And those two men that he put on it, Glenn Hall is one of them, and the other fellow is, Matt Birmingham, who right now runs the Vermont State Police. So, and they both seem like, as far as police goes, within that context, they're fine men. And Tom Lesperance, retired out.
So how long was it between Tom Nelson, who you didn't have a high opinion of, and finally getting people that you trusted?
Almost 2 years.
Would you be able to tell us anything about the former law enforcement person and the professor who are working on this case?
Yes, they contacted me not that long ago, probably 4 or 5 months ago, and said that they would be interested in looking into it. And we had a few conversations, and they have an organization called Justice for Survivors, and they have a little bit different way of looking at things, and they've gone back and did some interviews, and right now I'm very impressed with their findings so far. And they've been able to, I think they're going to have a one-tip event in March where they're going to have some press, and people will be invited to call in or personally come in and bring in tips, which they said actually worked quite well for them in Molly Bishop's case. But I'm very impressed with them, and they're very intelligent people. And I've come, it's people will not talk to police unless they have to, and but these people seem to have a way to, because, and I think not all private investigators, but certainly good private investigators can often get a lot more information because of that non-police threat, and be able to explore other angles or just get additional information. So I'm very confident that I'm very confident in them, and I hope that something actually will come out of it.
Bob Katz, who runs the Slam Dunks blog about Brianna's disappearance, mentioned that there was a commenter by the name of Cindy who was saying that her current boyfriend, who was James, had knowledge about the disappearance of Brianna and was struggling with feelings of guilt because of his knowledge, not necessarily because he was involved, but because of what he knew. But their efforts to track her down, I'm not sure, were successful. Are you aware of this instance, and further, are you aware perhaps of the identity of Cindy?
I'm not aware of this instance. I'm reasonably sure that there's been a tremendous amount of rumors that over the years, seem to come apart when the people actually get talked to. The rumor mill up there is just incredible. It's just incredible. And a lot of people have said over the years that they know, or they think they know, and quite frankly, it's just hearing other rumors, and then they choose to believe the rumors, and then they think that that's what happened. I mean, I know James has been really thoroughly investigated by the police, just because of the fact that he puts himself there a short time afterwards, and the fact that he was an ex-boyfriend, and I guess a few other factors that would make him somebody that they were really interested in. And I guess it's safe to say that they're fairly confident he has no involvement, that he doesn't really know anything either, as far as involvement. So,
just circling back to the rumors that you mentioned, and of course there's a ton of rumors in small towns, especially around a situation such as this. You spent how long in that area before you left? How long was it?
20 years or so.
And how long was it after Brianna's disappearance that you left?
It was about 2 years.
And was it due to the attention that you were getting from the disappearance? Partially was this is tough. This is a tough question, but because I have to kind of go back to stuff I don't really want to think about. But it was partially due to the attention. People would treat you very differently. You couldn't go into a store or anywhere else without someone, wanting to talk to you about it or something. It was partially due to things that came out in the course of the police investigation that made it very, very difficult to interact with people. And I will give you one example. One of the things that came out in the investigation
was that an 18-year-old male had molested Brianna when she was 13, and those people were neighbors. So, and Brianna never told anybody but her best friends about it, but the police, have verified it, and there was other situations where people had said that they had interactions with Brianna that may or may not be true, but to see those people on a weekly basis in the stores or something, it just makes your blood boil. And, there's nothing you can do about it. And then there was a lot of other situations where, quite frankly, I was involved in talking to people and asking questions and getting in confrontations with people that were not the best people. And sometimes those confrontations would get pretty ugly, and my son had threats. I had people coming up my driveway, which was a mile long in the woods at night, and then racing away when we tried to chase them down to find out who they were. So, I pissed some people off during the course of all that, too. So you can't try to live your life looking over your shoulder to some extent at that. And there was just other situations where I was doing a lot of consulting forestry work. I was out in the fields and woods and just dealing with a case of where, you see a piece of clothing, or you see a flock of buzzards in the field, or you see that, and you have to stop and force yourself to go and see, and that became kind of intolerable to live with.
It seemed like staying in that area made it so that no matter where you went, you would inevitably run into the case, and that wasn't necessarily the fate that you wanted for your family and for yourself.
That's completely correct, yes.
Now, a lot of time has passed, and you've been a really steadfast advocate and searcher for your daughter from the start. So, as not only her father, but as someone who's pretty caught up and is an active investigator in the case, is there anything that you want the public to know concerning her disappearance and the investigation at this juncture?
Well, it's something that I wouldn't want to wish on my worst enemy. And it's something that kind of never ends. And there's always a section in you that, that's always going to be there. Whether or not there's resolution even, it's kind of still going to be there. Most of my life, in believing that, there was kind of justice in life, and that you could depend on people like the police and stuff to be there when you need them. And it's kind of a cold reality sets in, and you start to, as you learn about how different things and how different inefficiencies and governments and agencies and all that kind of stuff works. It's a real eye opener. You learn to, I learned in the course of this, to use the people in the press somewhat, because I wanted the story out. Obviously, I wanted the right information to come in, but I've also been used by the press, a lot, to where, they felt that they manipulated me for their own ends and gains and stuff, and so I've learned to distrust them a lot also. So.
And on that topic, given the fact that, our show is in the media, how can we use our power to do the best work possible for your daughter's case? We want to make sure that nothing is being skewed, that nothing is being muddied. What can we do to most benefit the investigation and search for Brianna?
Well, one of the things I noticed in your podcast that I really liked is you just took a very open approach as to just kind of a general gathering of the facts. What I noticed a lot about a lot of the different coverages and stories and like the disappeared episode, I refused to really speak to those people. because I had it with that kind of thing because, and it happened in that episode also, they tend to slant it. They take it where they want to go, what they think happened or their conclusions, and it doesn't matter who you seem to talk to, that they promote that end of it. And I felt that you folks, took a real open-ended to it, and you just can't help but wonder, even after all these years, that someone knows something important that has not come forward with it because they either don't know it's important or they don't want to, because at that point their whole life maybe will change. But the fact that people in the media, when the story is out there, at least know that it's not forgotten, and that and hopefully their life circumstances may change, or that they may actually then at some point choose to come forward.
Right. Yeah, and I feel like that a lot of media sources sort of form their own narrative and then take information in and will skew it or elevate its significance to fit that narrative. We just want to find out what happened. We're just trying to talk to as many people as possible, rather than forming a story at first, informing ourselves as much as possible so we can possibly shed light on the truth.
Yes, absolutely. And that's, in a couple of sentences, you pretty much summarized it. Media does tend to do that. They form their own narrative to whatever suits what their audience is, and what do they think will give them the best ratings, and that's what they go with.
So from you, what are a few of the major facts that you mentioned before that would be responsible for us to put out there, coming right from your mouth?
My own conclusions is that, she most likely met someone there. There certainly was some kind of struggle that went on at that place, the Dutch Burnt Farm. From that struggle, Brianna was taken from. And I mean, beyond that, it starts to jump into the speculation of who or what or why, because there really doesn't seem to be any concrete, even whys sometimes. It's never really made a lot of sense, and that's why it's always been, people will try to put their own spin on it.
For us, continuing to be as open as we can and do, keep raising awareness. Like, is there anything specific that you think we should focus on, or you'd like to see a direction you'd like to see us go?
Well, I mean, obviously promoting the fact that it is active, promoting this, in the immediate sense. This One Tip campaign has a good chance of getting things out. I do monitor a webpage, Brianna Maitland Missing Family page, which I'm always, happy to have people put their ideas out there. At this stage, I really don't know what else to do, other than to have people to know that it's never over, until someone comes forward.
If there's anything else you'd like to say, or anything you think we left out you'd like to add, or anything, let us know. But yeah, we appreciate your time.
If this was comfortable enough for you, we're probably going to ask you to come back on if you're willing to. So hopefully we made it not too stressful.
No, it's fine. It was a good set of questions. I certainly don't mind coming back on and trying to, and I'm really okay with answering. If you people get any particular questions that you get feedback from people and they say, I wish, you'd asked his father this or asked his father that, or why is this way, or or what's that way. I mean, I'll be very open, about trying to answer them the best I can. In a broader sense, at least it keeps people, kind of educates them to maybe, in the course of their everyday lives, kind of keep their eyes and ears open for what's going on around them, or for anything else that may happen in the future to anybody of any kind of not just missing people, but any kind of activity or abuse or anything they see that it's just to take that extra second and imprint that into their mind a little bit, so that if it ever becomes valuable, they would have information that could come forward. Because that's the one thing I just can't help but think that somebody in weeks, maybe in within the last 2 weeks or something, certainly may have witnessed something, some interaction somewhere, and not thought twice about it. But in retrospect, it could be really vitally important.